Welcome again, everyone, to our second panel. And our first panel was quite exciting. I know the two gentlemen that were the panelists, a good friend of mine, and they said some very interesting things that we hope you will take with you. On this panel, we're going to be talking about education and employment. And the panelists are very key in our community to try to assist African Americans in general in getting access to education and employment. They will discuss their role in the general community, but specifically in the African American community, to assist African Americans with access to information and services and help. So let me introduce our panelists. To my far right is John Keisler, who is the Executive Director of the City of Long Beach Economic Development Department. And then next to him is Dr. Jane Conoley, who is the President of the university where I studied, California State University, Long Beach. Next to her is Mr. Tony Tate, who is with the Committee of Involved African American Parents. And then next to him is Dr. Alex Davis, who is the President of the Executive Director of the Los Angeles County and Orange County Consortium, and she will explain that to you. I'm not sure. I think all of you were in the audience of our first panelist, and there were some very interesting and exciting things that they said. And we talked about post-slavery syndrome. We talked about how African Americans feel, the leadership of African Americans, some very, very interesting thoughts. Now, we know that education and employment is key to having a successful life. Your organizations are key into it, and really the hub of that, the recipients of that, are Black parents who want their children to get a good education, which will lead them to employment. Parents who can be employed, a living wage, safety, education, economic development, and a conglomeration of universities. And the universities are not the only way a person can get higher education, vocational training and the like. But I want to start the questioning with Dr. Jane Conoley. When I was a student at the university in the late 60s and early 70s, there was a upsurge in African American students in many cases through the special admissions program called EOP, which still exists. But as I go to, Dr. Conoley, as I go to that university, and I walk through that university, there's a noticeable absence of African American students, especially African American males, especially over the last 30 years. So the question that I believe the community wants to give you or pose to you is, what are the challenges of an African American student actually getting on your university campus, recruiting them and increasing those numbers, and the retention of those students? How would you like to address that issue? What are the challenges there?
Well, as you noticed, you're exactly right. Our absolute number of African American students has remained just about the same over the last 8-9 years. The number who apply, usually about 4,000, 4,100, sometimes 3,900, but it's usually in that 4,000 number. That stayed the same. The number we get in, 700 or 800 every year, that has stayed the same. So that's the bad news. There's something that we're not doing, and I'll tell you about it if we have time, some of the new programs we put in place. I'd say the good news is the persistence rate, that is staying for your 4 years or your 4.5 years, has risen dramatically. So there's been a 30% increase in graduation overall among African Americans. Now, we were one of the few schools in the United States, one of 52, that actually increased the overall graduation rate and narrowed the gap between more affluent white students, poor students of color. So we work hard on that, but there's still an awful lot of work to be done. So the 4-year graduation rate.
Four-year graduation rate for African Americans has doubled in the last 5 years. And the within 6-year graduation rate has increased by 35%. There's still, and the gap between groups has really narrowed. But I'm very frustrated and would love some advice about how to get more applications. And then, of course, we're accepting African Americans at the same rate we're accepting every other group. And because I feel like once we get more students in, they will stay. We have enlarged, for example, this coming summer for the first time, instead of having only 75 students in a summer bridge program, we'll have 300 students. And they don't all have to live on campus. Some can get it, by electronic, and some can do it by day. So we're trying to adapt our strategies because, as they say, if something's not working, stop doing it. And I would say it hasn't worked in getting more. What has worked is getting graduation rates and persistence rates up.
So what you're saying, Dr. Conoley, is that getting them there is a tough job, which is not only your job, but a collaboration with the schools. But once they get there, they are successful in matriculating through and graduating.
Very much so.
Okay. Now, we'll go to a parent. Tony, you have a parent group, and you heard Dr. Conoley talk about getting specifically to California State University, Long Beach, although Long Beach City College is an excellent school as well. What are some of the challenges you find that parents are telling you, the difficulty of getting their children to position themselves to go specifically to California State University, Long Beach, as well as the other universities?
That's a very large question to answer. Not only on a regular basis speaking with parents, but being a parent myself. I currently have 2 children in college. They preferred, it was ideally to go to Cal State Long Beach. They both fulfilled the AG requirements to go. And I think it's a great program that Long Beach Unified School District has in place to assist students in going to Cal State Long Beach. The problem is being African American sometimes puts you in a precarious place. And what do I mean by that? Cal State Long Beach is one of those impacted campuses. And by that, I mean there are so many applications that go in that financially, when they look at who's going to qualify and the ability to pay, a lot of times at the African American parent who's financially stable, they provide all of the support for their children. In a case like that, it's a disservice. They're almost better off at another campus financially. They'll get less financial aid. They'll get a smaller financial aid package than, say, a person that maybe was an immigrant that came to this country would probably get into that school faster than an African-American student.
Wow, that's an interesting, that's a statistic that we should look at. The African-American students have a tougher time getting into Cal State Long Beach and other schools than those students who come from out of state or out of the country. Would you like to speak to that, Dr. Conoley?
Well, 96% of our students are Californians. We have a tiny percentage of out-of-state and a tiny percentage of international. Our admissions are completely blind to your ethnic heritage. If a student who graduates from a Long Beach Unified High School has met the A to G and has met it's the basic minimum, but it's still high, the index to get in, they are guaranteed a spot. Our fees are toward the bottom of other Cal States, and so we're not the least expensive Cal State to go to, but we're certainly not the most expensive. And the issue about financial aid you bring up, I'd have to do some more looking into that, because that is such a complicated issue. But for example, if you're below the federal poverty line, you'll get a Pell Grant. That's a federal grant. Now, 57% of our students have Pell Grants. So that lets you know the kind of demographic that we're serving. Those students are just as successful. They graduate at the same time as people who, come in with greater financial background from their family. But financial aid that is a complicated thing, and I certainly I'm glad I have other experts working on that rather than me.
If there's something I can say to that. African-American parents' financial information, the way it's put on a FAFSA, is reportable and it's checkable.
Right.
Immigrants don't have that same situation. And so because it's not reported that way, and because the checks and balances can be what they are, that's where you get the disparity. And that's what needs to be worked out.
Yeah.
We have to kind of go out of our way to even the playing field and close the achievement gap with African American students and parents. Because it should not be a handicap if you have a stable home life, if you have a mother and father, and if there's no financial disparity, they should be able to go to Cal State Long Beach. My children don't go to Cal State Long Beach. They are on scholarship at other universities.
Now, you know, what I like about this is conversation, and they're listening to one another, and they're not trying to interrupt one another. We see so much of that on television where somebody's interrupting somebody and they're just out talking. But these two now, I urge you to have a dialogue away from the cameras, with each other, and say, how can we meet this challenge and get more African Americans in Cal State Long Beach? Now let's move on, and we're going to come back to that point. But now, Dr. Davis, you operate a consortium. First of all, we want to ask, what is that consortium? Could you explain that?
Okay, yeah. So I have a dual role. So I'm Assistant Vice Chancellor at Rancho Santiago Community College District. And I'm also the of Economic and Workforce Development. So my role is to bring in resources to create pathways for students to transition from even middle school, high school, to community college, then to the universities. And so the regional consortiums are across the state of California. There's 7. And they are comprised of colleges in geographical areas. And I oversee the largest of the 7. And there's 28 colleges that I work directly with the presidents and the chancellors to move forward the vision for the region. And there's 9 of those colleges exist in Orange County across 4 districts, and the other 19 colleges are in LA County across 11 districts, of which 10 of those are single college districts, and 1 is the Los Angeles Community College District, which is the largest district in the world for 2-year community colleges. And so across the state of California, there's about 2.2 million students in our colleges, and of that number, 6% of those are African American students. It ranges from traditional age to non-traditional age, and many demographics. And that's the issue there, is only 6% of our students in California community colleges are African American. And we don't have the same issue with the universities. We're open access, so we don't have a competitive process in which they have to apply. And so, but one of the things in my years of being a dean of instruction at Los Angeles City College, I worked directly with faculty and students. And one thing that that really strikes home for me is that when students are trying to survive, it's hard for them to aspire and to dream, right? When they're trying to figure out where they're going to lay their head or where their next meal is coming from, how they're going to get to class, do they have to go through communities in which are detrimental to their life to get to class. So there's many socioeconomic factors that prevent our kids from making it to the classroom. Now, that's not to say that we don't have a job as educators to make it easier for them to access education. I just brought the region leaders in a retreat talking about priorities for students of all color. But one of the things that we have to do is we have to make classroom accessible through use of technology, right? If a student is having a problem getting to class for many reasons, it could be childcare, other reasons, they should have the opportunity to come in virtually, right, using technology. And so that requires our faculty who have purview over instruction in the classroom to really think about the type of student that we're inheriting today. It's a different student. I remember microwaves first coming aboard and cell phones, but our students, they were born into a time where technology is their existence. And so we have to be able to embrace that to enhance their learning instead of letting technology take over.
Now that's really interesting. When I was going to school, there was a catalog. You had to go through the catalog, but now the technology is as such. You were listening to Mr. Davis, Mr. Tate, Tate, I'm sorry, and Dr. Conoley.
I don't think we're married.
No. About the challenges. Now I want to move to you, Mr. Keisler. You heard this, and before I do that, you were here through the entire presentation. You heard two African Americans talk about the challenges and the history. And as a white male, before we talk about economics, what were your impressions of all the talk that was going on in the songs and the history? Be honest with us in terms of that, because we're divided as a country. And before we talk about economics, what was your personal feelings about the first panel you heard and the songs that you heard?
Well, thanks, Mr. Parker, and thank you to everybody who's been organizing the events over this weekend, particularly Laverne Duncan. It's been a passion, I know, of hers from Andy Street as a real leader of the community to grow this event and bring attention. And it's Long Beach. This is Long Beach. This is who we are. We're an extremely diverse community. It's one of our strengths. We were one of the first cities in the country that didn't have a majority of one population. And as a city, as a resident, learning about who we are comes through events like this, hearing the testimony, hearing about the work that not only Dr. Norman has done, he's helped me on interview panels, he's helped inform the work, whether I was at the police department or whether I was in economic development. And I think from my perspective, the reason I brought my two sons today, is to hear that story and to know that, hey, we all have different, we've had different experiences. That's partly cultural, that's partly through the communities that we share and live through, but it's deeply personal. And loving Long Beach means understanding Long Beach, and the history, for better or worse, is dynamic and it's diverse. And that's going to be one of our primary strengths as we move forward in this new economy. And so in terms of what we do with the Economic Development Department at the city, is we try to help people find economic opportunity. And we're talking a bit about workforce development programs. And we look at our universities, our city colleges, as our major suppliers of workforce, creating economic opportunity for workers to find jobs and be competitive in this new economy. But we also have entrepreneurs. We have business owners who employ those people. And so when we think about economic opportunity for all people, we think about the ways people are able to access opportunity and make money to take care of their families, to provide homes and health care and these things that are necessities in life. And so some of the things that I think about, particularly from the perspective of our staff, is we serve the community, which means we need to get out there and we need to hear discussions like this to understand our community and then design solutions around the unique challenges that each of the individual demographic and geographic groups of the city face each day. So from my perspective, in my role as Economic Development Director, if my job is to help people make more money, I want to understand the individual user's experience. I want to understand what it's like for those kids, for those parents. I used to be a middle school teacher in Newark, New Jersey. And that experience really opened my eyes to the challenges that families face, generational challenges within the cities and American cities. And that really has informed, I think, the work that I do personally, the mission that I have, the vocation that I have and bring to the city. But then it's also the fact that this city, like you, my dad he was the first Keisler to go to Cal State Long Beach, first Keisler to go to college. And this city provided that opportunity for my family at one time, and then, of course, has handed that down to subsequent generations. But I'd love to talk more about what we're doing with business development, real estate development, and how that also is an opportunity for people to make money in the city.
Ahmed Safir talked about 50 years ago when on Anaheim there was a number of African American small businesses. That has gone away. How can specifically the African American community, which is now have moved many from the central city to all parts of the city, in many cases in North Long Beach, how can you assist us in building that back up where a person who wants to be an entrepreneur, even a young person going to the schools wanting to be an entrepreneur, what kind of programs and services for a young person to be an entrepreneur? What are you doing for that?
Yeah, well, that's a daily question for us. So one of the exciting things that's going on right now with regard to entrepreneurship and small business development is that there's sort of a new philosophy that's taken shape called ecosystem building. And the idea is that you start by taking, mapping your community, your ecosystem, and identifying what resources are available to entrepreneurs, no matter what age or what type of business that they want to start. And so one of the things that we've been doing over the last year is through our Everyone In economic inclusion focus area. I've passed out some of our economic development blueprint documents. If you look at page 8, you can see we have a series of objectives around increasing the number of businesses owned by people of color, by immigrant entrepreneurs, and then tapping into and building programs like our new microfinance program, which is called Kiva. That is a crowd-funded source of capital. In our first 6 months, just these last few months, we found out from a lot of our minority-owned business owners that they were having a hard time accessing capital through loans from commercial banks and otherwise. We know that that's a challenge, and so we introduced our microfinance program, and we had over 1,300 people from the community donate money, lend money to 12 entrepreneurs. Of those 12 entrepreneurs, 6 were African American, and of those 6 entrepreneurs that were African American, 4 were women. And Deidre, outside from our Essence Beauty Supply, she is an example of somebody who's tapped into those programs, a young entrepreneur in North Long Beach. And she and I were talking yesterday about her experience. And not only was it the initial funding, the $10,000 loan that she was able to get, but it was also the technical assistance. It was the ecosystem of people that then put their own money into her business from the community that starts to build a network and starts to build an ecosystem of people that support these young entrepreneurs. And so that's just one example. I have some others, but it's an exciting new philosophy.
Dr. Conoley, when you hear Mr. Keisler talk about that, what kind of collaboration would the university have with the city in terms of your business department and helping Black students matriculate into the business field? Could you talk to about that?
Yeah, we have a close collaboration. We have a new, not brand new, but maybe a year or 2 years old, right? Our Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. That is in a partnership with the city specifically. And that's come on in every Tuesday night, I think, from 7 to 9 p.m. They're holding workshops either on the campus or somewhere downtown, and teaching people about business plans, about what does it mean to be an entrepreneur, how do you map the ecosystem to tell, how do I get my idea out there. We also are running now continuously on campus innovation challenges where we put together teams of engineers, artists, business school folks, and they come up with a product. And it's like the TV show, which I haven't seen, but I've heard about, Shark Tank. They get mentors and they present it, and the ones who win actually will get some cash and also some in-kind help to bring their idea to market. And some of them have been very successful. It's a switch for us. It's a switch on the academic side to really take the notion of entrepreneurship seriously. We're always about innovation, but the notion that we be preparing our students to be entrepreneurs is fairly new for us, but we have a lot of faculty involved. And in fact, I just talked to a faculty member who's planning to offer faculty development. Like, how could you as a faculty member you yourself be more entrepreneurial. So I think it's spreading throughout campus. I'm certainly supporting it because I think that's the new economy that all students will face. But you've raised a good question. I don't think we've done a specific outreach to our African American students, and so I'm going to tuck that away and make sure we do it.
Tony, African American males, many people believe that they're an endangered species, and I'm one of the people that subscribe to that opinion. What is your parent group doing, and you as a black man, knowing that African American students are in danger in a lot of ways, not only educationally, but in terms of public safety? How, as a black man and as the head of your organization, are you addressing that issue? And we're talking about education, but we're also talking about an African American male who may, in some cases, face police brutality, face suspensions in schools, and that kind of thing.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Even reaching back to the panel that was before this one, there's some generational things that exist in our households that have to be dealt with. Now, your first teacher is not in the classroom. Your first teacher is at the house, and it's mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, uncle, aunt. Those are the real teachers that give you the roadmap to be able to navigate life. Now, we can't change, or can we, change school curriculum to include classes like Survival 101. You know, here are real economics, here's how you make ends meet. Back in the day when I was in, I want to say junior high school, they had home economics. That turned into how to make a grilled cheese. Really, really good. And I can still make a real good grilled cheese, by the way, just so y'all know. But there ought to be classes that talk about how to do basic budgeting for your household. What happens when you lose your job in California? A lot of young men, especially, get caught up into things simply because they have no hope. It's not that they don't know right or wrong. They go down that road of wrong because they can't see any other way out. It's a vision problem. It's a faith problem. It's a belief system. They make decisions, bad decisions, the wrong decisions, simply because they see no other option. The key for us as parents, as educators, as members of the community, is to make sure these young men know what the options are. And here's how you create more options for yourself. You know, things that you need to do. That program that you talked about, entrepreneurs. See, a college student that's paying a whole lot of money for classes, and here comes this program. The question becomes, does that program have college credit? It's a time thing, because they know, unlike a lot of other students that may have a full financial package, their time is very, very valuable, because that student is actually going to school and working a job. So they got to take away from their job to be a part of the program that fits what they want to do when they get out. Is their credit tied to it? You see what I mean?
Sure.
Now, Dr. Davis, if you can give us kind of an example of some of the hurdles that students, African American students in LA County and Orange County have to go through in order to, you alluded to some of that, but can you give us a chilling testimony about a case that you have been involved with of the challenges of matriculating through the university system?
Yeah, so I want to go back to small business development for a second.
Okay.
So I was at El Camino College, and I oversaw the Small Business Development Center. And at that time, I developed an entrepreneurial youth program for students 15 to 27. And the state had that age range for a reason. I can't think of it right now. It was some time ago. But what was really chilling for me is that 90% of those students were African American. And the 15, 16, 17-year-olds, they didn't see themselves living to 18 and 19. And so that's a lot of our kids, because of the way our kids are being murdered and taken out, they just don't see themselves reaching 18 and 19.
That's chilling to think
Yeah,
about.
and these are personal testimonies, and this was back in 2008. And so these were stories that I was personally hearing from these young people, and they did very well in the entrepreneurial program. Many of them stayed to the end because they were getting hot meals in the morning, and they were getting hot lunches in the afternoon. So I think that most of the problems are non-school related. And I say that because as a dean, when I was at Los Angeles City College over instruction and career technical education, the Black kids found me, right? There's not a lot of us out there in administration positions. And the stories are just from, from being molested to, many of the stories have nothing to do with school. Now they've got to come to community college and four-year universities and navigate their way to resources, which they don't know. Many of them are first-time generation students, right? They step onto campus, there either is internal customer service or there isn't, right? So that can be an issue on our campuses as well, which the presidents and the leaders are now working on those things. But and so financial aid could be another issue. It is another issue from them. And just having the support that they need to stay the course. As I mentioned before, I think one of the previous panelists mentioned intergenerational dialogue. That's not happening in the African American community. Many of our students don't have the parents and the grandparents to have those conversations and to codify their dreams and their aspirations, right? And so they have to get that on the outside, and that influence may look a little bit different than what it looks like coming from a parent and a grandparent. And so we have the Latino family, we have the Asian families. They're doing those kinds of things, right? In the Latino family structure, the grandparent is the one who has the say-so, right? But they're doing that. They're pushing their kids through college. And so I go back to, how do you dream when you're trying to survive, right? I have a 23-year-old son who is trying to find his way, has access to more resources than he can dream of. And he's still trying to figure it out, what the path that he wants to go down. He went to Morgan State University for 3 years and decided it wasn't for him. Okay, then what's next? But dreaming takes sacrifice, and our young people have to realize that it's not microwave. It takes a while. It takes sacrificing some of those other things to stay the course with your education, and also correcting course when a door is not open for you. Then stay in the course, but finding those resources is critical to them. And then we have to make sure we create awareness in the community that you have access. There's so many structures that are in place for our students in the community college system, but many don't know. They're not aware of these structures that are there to set them up for success.
One of the things I want to say before I go to each panelist and have them give a closing statement is that many of the parents that we're talking about are single family parents with females head of household. And because of absence of males in the home that don't give you that other half of being a man or validating a daughter to be, have high standards, that's one of the factors. But in the few minutes, or 3 minutes we have remaining, I want to start with Mr. Keisler and go across the board. We have a lot of African-American leaders in the audience. I would like you to address them and tell them what your organization or office or department or consortium can offer them in terms of assistance with the African-American community. In other words, your value to the African-American community, how would you characterize that? I want to start with you, John, and then we'll go right across. We only have about 3 minutes, so about a minute each.
Absolutely. So I think for us, when we're looking at income creation and building up wealth, it's about ownership. And so this is one of the reasons that I go back to ownership, whether it's small business ownership, whether it's home ownership. These are the primary drivers of wealth in this country and in this city. And when we look at the disparities between the different demographic groups, the biggest difference in terms of wealth accumulation that's passed on from generation to generation addressing some of these issues is ownership. So one of the primary ways that people derive income, if they own a home, that equity is an asset to them, and that can be passed on, and then that can be securitized for loans and for startup capital and for other things that you want to do. You need to be able to access that capital. So for the leadership in our community, one of the things that we want to make sure we're connecting is our business development, our workforce development, and our real estate development programs. And that's why we've wrapped them all into our one department, because they're all interdependent and intertwined. We need mentors. We need employers. And just as an example, I was talking with a Black-owned business yesterday, and we were talking about how she might tap into our youth workforce development program, where for the first 200 hours, we can use federal funding to pay 100% of the salary for those young people up to the age of 24. And so getting these young people into businesses to work with you, to see how you run your business, and to build that confidence that I can own my own business too someday. Now, I'm going to have to learn, and I'm going to have to apprentice and be around good leadership. But you as leaders have an incredible amount to offer. You may not seem, you're working hard, and it doesn't seem like what you're doing every day may matter. But work with us at the Economic Development Department, because we're looking to engage community-based leaders to be the conduits, to be the face, and to be the role models of these kinds of programs.
Real quick, we have about a minute left, just very quick comments.
Sure, I just say we have, for example, equal opportunity program at the university. If one of our African American students is encouraged and mentored to go into that program, 92% of them graduate on time. So I would echo what John said: mentors, encouragers, people who actually tell their story to build hope, because I get it. And we are always looking for African American men. We have a Jordan High School Math Collaborative. We have a Men's Success Initiative. We're always looking for African American men to work with our African American students.
Tony.
Okay, I would just say we have got to stay engaged. I mean, yeah, let's vote. We need a different president. I don't mind saying that. But we need leaders that are in our community that are willing to act on our behalf. We have to be engaged. We have to, as parents, be a part of the school site council to hold the faculty accountable. We have to be at the colleges holding them accountable. We have to stay engaged and not choose to let what is already in place be in place. We have to get involved. If you're able to, you do. Encourage where you can.
Dr. Davis.
Last thing is, all African American students have the first year of community college. If you're graduating from high school, you get the first year of community college free through the California College Promise. And the governor is working on making sure the second year is free also, but that message has to be communicated in the communities in which we live.
Well, I want to thank all the panelists. Let's give them a hand. All the panelists for their comments today. You and in the audience, there is a chart that you can give your impressions of the panel. We encourage you to do that. We thank you for coming. We thank the panelists again for coming. It was my honor to engage the panelists. And in some ways, we should always connect with each other and keep the dialogue going. Thank you very much for attending this.